The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Braxton as Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Rivera reviewed the intelligence reports that would change everything. What started as isolated incidents of violent disturbances in the nearby town of Millbrook had escalated into something far more sinister. Rivera, a decorated veteran of 3 overseas deployments, had seen his share of chaos, but the grainy security footage on his desk showed something that defied all military doctrine he'd ever studied. Bodies that should have stayed down were getting back up, and they weren't interested in surrender or negotiation. Captain Jake Thompson burst through the office door, his usually composed demeanor cracked with urgency. "Sir, we've lost contact with Bravo Team. They were conducting a reconnaissance mission in Millbrook's residential district when their radio went dead 20 minutes ago." Rivera studied Thompson, one of his most reliable officers, and noted the barely concealed fear in his eyes. The captain had earned his stripes in urban warfare, but this was different. This was uncharted territory where conventional military wisdom meant nothing. The base's emergency klaxon pierced the morning air, followed by the voice of Sergeant Major Diana Wells over the intercom. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. We have confirmed hostile contact at the perimeter fence, Sector 7. Rivera grabbed his rifle and tactical vest, muscle memory taking over as his mind processed the implications. If the infected had reached the base perimeter, the situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated. The zombie outbreak that started as whispered rumors among the civilian population was now knocking on their door. As Rivera and Thompson rushed toward Sector 7, they encountered Corporal Alex Martinez leading a squad of fresh-faced soldiers who looked barely old enough to shave, let alone face an enemy that didn't follow the rules of engagement. "Martinez, what's your squad's ammunition status?" Rivera barked, knowing that traditional military protocol would need rapid adaptation. "Full loadout, sir, but the men are asking questions about these targets," Martinez replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. The young corporal had grown up on a ranch in Texas, where putting down sick animals was just part of life, but even his rural background hadn't prepared him for this scenario. The first visual contact came as they reached the observation tower. Through his binoculars, Rivera watched a shambling mass of what had once been Millbrook's residents pressing against the chain-link perimeter. Their movements were wrong, jerky, uncoordinated, but relentless. A construction worker in a hard hat, his orange safety vest torn and blood-stained, clawed at the fence with fingers worn down to bone. Beside him, a woman in a nurse's uniform, her scrubs bearing the name Jennifer on a plastic tag, snapped her teeth at empty air with mechanical persistence. These weren't enemy combatants in any traditional sense, they were walking nightmares that challenged every rule of engagement the military had ever established. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, the base's demolitions expert, approached with his characteristic blend of dark humor and professional competence. "Sir, I've been thinking about our defensive options. Standard crowd control measures assume the targets want to preserve their lives. These things don't seem to share that concern." Rivera nodded grimly, appreciating Chen's ability to cut through the psychological horror and focus on tactical realities. The sergeant's expertise with explosives would prove invaluable in the coming hours, but they needed to balance effective zombie elimination with preserving their defensive infrastructure. The radio crackled with reports from other sectors. Private Emma Rodriguez, manning the communications post, coordinated incoming intelligence with the efficiency that had made her the youngest specialist ever promoted at the base. "Sir, we're receiving similar reports from bases across the eastern seaboard. Fort Harrison has gone dark, and Camp Morrison is reporting being overrun." The scope of the crisis was becoming clear. This wasn't a localized incident but a widespread catastrophe that would test every aspect of their military training. Medical Officer Captain Lisa Johnson arrived with a grim assessment from the base hospital. "Colonel, I've been reviewing the CDC reports that came through before communications started failing. The infection appears to be transmitted through bite wounds, with reanimation occurring within 24 to 48 hours post-mortem. Our standard medical protocols for treating wounded personnel will need immediate revision." Her clinical approach to the impossible helped ground the discussion in actionable intelligence, but Rivera could see the weight of professional responsibility in her eyes. As the shambling horde outside grew larger, Master Sergeant David Brooks, the base's senior drill instructor, emerged from the barracks with a complement of soldiers whose training had just taken on life-or-death significance. "All available personnel are armed and ready, sir. I've distributed ammunition according to the modified engagement protocols we discussed." Brooks had spent 15 years shaping raw recruits into disciplined soldiers, but today he was asking them to confront an enemy that turned everything they'd learned upside down. The sound of more vehicles approaching drew their attention to the main gate, where a convoy of civilian refugees had arrived seeking military protection. Among them, Rivera could see families with children, elderly residents, and wounded survivors who might already be infected. The colonel faced his first major tactical decision: maintaining base security versus humanitarian obligations. The choice would set the tone for everything that followed in humanity's fight for survival against the walking dead. The convoy of desperate civilians pressed against Fort Braxton's main gate as Rivera weighed an impossible decision. Among the refugees, he spotted Dr. Patricia Williams, Millbrook's chief medical examiner, cradling a blood-soaked arm while supporting an elderly man who might have been bitten. The doctor's expertise could prove invaluable in understanding their enemy, but bringing potentially infected individuals inside the base violated every quarantine protocol in the book. Through his binoculars, Rivera watched as Staff Sergeant Mike Foster, manning the gate checkpoint, looked back toward the command post for guidance while terrified families begged for sanctuary. Corporal Martinez's radio crackled with urgent intelligence from the perimeter guards. Movement detected in the eastern tree line. Estimate 40 to 50 hostiles approaching from multiple directions. The infected weren't just randomly shambling anymore, they seemed drawn to the noise and activity of the base like moths to flame. Thompson consulted his tactical map, marking potential approach routes with red ink that looked disturbingly like blood in the morning light. "Sir, if they're converging from multiple directions, we're looking at a coordinated response pattern. These things might be more intelligent than we initially assessed." Sergeant Major Wells approached with a squad deployment recommendation that balanced humanitarian concerns with tactical necessities. "Colonel, I propose we establish a quarantine facility in Building C, close enough to provide medical attention but isolated enough to contain any complications." Her years of experience managing complex logistical operations showed as she outlined a plan that could save lives without compromising base security. The building she'd selected had previously served as a storage facility, but its concrete construction and limited access points made it ideal for their current needs. The first test of their modified engagement protocols came when a group of infected breached the outer fence line near Sector 4. Private Tyler Washington, barely 19 years old and fresh from basic training, found himself face-to-face with a zombie wearing his high school's football jersey, someone who might have been his classmate just days earlier. The young soldier's training kicked in as he followed the new rules of engagement: double tap to the head, maintain safe distance, and confirm neutralization before moving on. His shots were clean and professional, but Rivera could see the psychological toll in the kids shaking hands afterward. Captain Johnson established a triage system that resembled a battlefield medical station crossed with a contamination protocol. Refugees underwent immediate medical screening, with potential bite victims isolated in separate sections of the quarantine facility. Her medical team, including Specialist Nancy Adams and Corporal Michael Torres, worked with the efficiency of emergency room professionals while implementing completely new procedures for an unprecedented crisis. The doctor's ability to maintain clinical detachment while treating people who might turn into monsters within hours impressed everyone who watched her work. Communications specialist Rodriguez intercepted fragmented radio transmissions from other military installations, painting a grim picture of the outbreak spread. Fort Harrison's final transmission had been a desperate request for air support before their radio went permanently silent. Camp Morrison reported successful initial containment before their signals degraded into static and screaming. The regional communication network was collapsing, leaving Fort Braxton increasingly isolated in their fight against the walking dead. Demolitions expert Chen presented Rivera with a defensive improvement plan that utilized the base's existing infrastructure while adapting to their new enemy's characteristics. "Sir, I recommend establishing kill zones at predetermined choke points using our available explosives. These targets don't take cover or employ tactical awareness, so we can use that predictability against them." His engineering background showed as he sketched modifications to the base's defensive perimeter that would channel zombie movements into areas where concentrated firepower could be most effective. The afternoon brought an unexpected development when Dr. Williams, having passed her medical screening, provided crucial intelligence about the infection's progression patterns. "Colonel, I've observed 3 distinct stages of the infection process. The initial bite creates a localized necrotic reaction, followed by systemic shutdown, and finally reanimation with limited motor function but persistent aggressive behavior." Her scientific approach to the horror helped the military personnel understand their enemy in tactical terms rather than supernatural ones. Master Sergeant Brooks implemented accelerated combat training for base personnel who had never expected to face hostile action. Cooks, clerks, and maintenance workers received crash courses in zombie engagement protocols, with emphasis on headshot accuracy and close-quarters combat techniques. The veteran drill instructor's ability to maintain discipline and focus under pressure kept morale stable even as the reality of their situation became increasingly clear. As evening approached, the infected gathered in larger numbers outside the perimeter fence, their moaning creating an unsettling soundtrack to the soldiers' preparation activities. Rivera realized that darkness would bring new challenges, as their enemy showed no need for rest or sleep. The base's floodlight system would become crucial for maintaining defensive effectiveness, but the lights would also attract more zombies from the surrounding area, creating a dangerous cycle of escalation. Darkness descended over Fort Braxton like a suffocating blanket as the base's floodlights illuminated a scene from humanity's worst nightmares. The zombie horde had grown throughout the day, transforming from scattered individual threats into a coordinated mass of undead flesh pressing against the perimeter defenses. Rivera stood in the command center, watching security monitors that showed hundreds of infected individuals shambling across what had been peaceful farmland just hours earlier. The colonel's tactical experience told him they were facing a siege scenario, but conventional siege doctrine assumed the attackers needed food, rest, and supply lines, none of which applied to their current enemy. Private Rodriguez intercepted a faint radio transmission from a National Guard unit operating near the state capitol. "Request immediate extraction, ammunition running low, they just keep coming." The transmission cut to static, followed by gunfire and screams before going permanently silent. Captain Thompson marked another military installation as presumed lost on the situation map, noting the expanding pattern of communication failures that suggested the outbreak's relentless spread across the entire region. Sergeant Chen's defensive modifications proved their worth when the first major assault came at 0200 hours. A group of approximately 60 zombies had congregated at the main gate, apparently drawn by the sound of the generators powering the base's essential systems. The demolitions expert strategically placed charges funneled the attacking horde into predetermined kill zones where overlapping fields of fire from elevated positions allowed the defenders to achieve maximum effectiveness with minimum ammunition expenditure. Corporal Martinez led his squad in the first systematic zombie elimination operation, implementing the combat protocols they developed throughout the day. The young soldiers moved with professional precision, maintaining formation discipline while adapting their training to an enemy that felt no pain, showed no fear, and required complete destruction of brain tissue to be permanently stopped. Martinez's rural background proved invaluable as he coached urban-raised soldiers in the mindset needed for putting down dangerous animals, even when those animals wore human faces. Dr. Williams made a disturbing discovery while examining zombie remains from the evening's engagements. "Colonel, I've found evidence of continued tissue degradation in the reanimated subjects, but their motor functions appear to improve over time. The fresher specimens show more coordination and purposeful movement patterns." Her findings suggested that the military's defensive advantages might erode as the zombie population matured and potentially became more dangerous rather than less threatening over time. The base's medical facility faced its first major crisis when one of the refugees, an elderly man named Harold Peterson, succumbed to his injuries and reanimated in the quarantine ward. Specialist Adams discovered the situation during a routine medical check, finding Peterson attacking another patient with the relentless fury characteristic of the infected. Captain Johnson's quick thinking and Adams' steady shooting prevented a potentially catastrophic breach of base security, but the incident highlighted the ongoing danger posed by wounded survivors. Communications specialist Rodriguez established contact with a civilian survivor group holed up in Millbrook's shopping mall, led by a former police sergeant named Kevin Murphy. "We've got about 30 people here, including kids, and our ammunition is running low," Murphy reported over a crackling radio connection. "These things have been testing our defenses all day, and I think they're learning our patrol patterns." The survivors represented both an opportunity for gathering intelligence and a potential rescue mission that would strain the base's resources. Master Sergeant Brooks organized the base's non-combat personnel into support roles that freed up trained soldiers for defensive duties. Kitchen staff prepared field rations that could be consumed quickly during combat operations, while maintenance crews established backup power systems and communication redundancies. The veteran NCO's organizational skills proved as valuable as marksmanship in maintaining the base's operational effectiveness under siege conditions. Staff Sergeant Foster's gate security team repelled 3 separate zombie incursions during the pre-dawn hours, each attack larger and more persistent than the last. The infected showed no tactical sophistication, but their sheer numbers and absolute fearlessness created challenges that conventional military training hadn't addressed. Foster's team adapted by establishing interlocking defensive positions that allowed them to maintain continuous fire while rotating ammunition and managing fatigue. As dawn approached, Rivera received a priority transmission from Regional Command that changed everything. "Fort Braxton, this is General Patterson. Military assets are being consolidated at secure facilities for Operation Lazarus. You are designated as a primary evacuation point for civilian survivors and military personnel from compromised installations." The mission parameters had just expanded from base defense to refugee coordination, requiring a complete reassessment of their tactical situation and resource allocation. The morning light revealed the true scope of their challenge as zombie corpses littered the approach routes to the base, but fresh infected continued to emerge from the surrounding communities. Dr. Williams noted that the zombies showed no interest in consuming their fallen comrades, focusing entirely on locating living human targets. This behavioral pattern suggested that the infection created creatures driven by an instinct to spread the contagion rather than satisfy hunger in any conventional sense. Private Washington distinguished himself during the final engagement of the night by successfully coordinating indirect fire from the base's mortar team against a large zombie concentration threatening the eastern perimeter. His ability to maintain radio discipline while calling in accurate fire missions under extreme stress impressed the veteran officers and established him as a valuable asset for future operations. Dawn brought no respite as Fort Braxton transformed from a military installation into humanity's last stand in the region. Rivera surveyed the zombie-littered landscape through his command post windows while processing General Patterson's new orders. Operation Lazarus required the base to serve as a collection point for survivors and military personnel from across the infected zone, but their current defensive capabilities were already stretched thin. The colonel's logistical training told him they needed to think bigger than just holding ground. They needed to create a sustainable fortress capable of supporting hundreds of refugees while maintaining offensive capabilities. Captain Thompson presented an intelligence briefing that painted an increasingly grim picture of the outbreak's expansion. "Sir, satellite imagery shows major population centers along the eastern seaboard experiencing significant infrastructure breakdown. Highway networks are clogged with abandoned vehicles, and we're detecting widespread fire signatures suggesting urban areas are burning without fire department response." The captain's analysis confirmed what everyone feared: civilization was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined possible. Sergeant Major Wells coordinated the arrival of the first survivor convoy, a National Guard unit from Fort Morrison led by Major Sandra Phillips. The major's haggard appearance and shell-shocked soldiers told the story of their base's fall without words. We held for 36 hours before the infected breached our ammunition depot, Phillips reported to Rivera. Lost 70% of our personnel during the evacuation. These things, they don't stop. They don't get tired. They just keep coming until you run out of bullets or make a mistake. The expanded refugee population created new challenges that tested every aspect of the base's organization. Corporal Torres established a registration system for tracking civilian survivors, military personnel, and potential infected individuals while maintaining operational security. His administrative background proved invaluable as he created databases and workflow processes that kept essential information flowing to decision-makers despite the chaos surrounding them. Dr. Williams collaborated with the newly arrived medics to establish comprehensive infection screening protocols based on her growing understanding of the zombie virus. We're implementing a 48-hour observation period for all new arrivals, with isolated housing and regular medical monitoring, she explained to Rivera. I've also begun working on field expedient testing methods that might allow us to identify infection before the symptomatic phase begins. Her scientific approach offered hope for better managing the constant threat of internal infection. Demolitions expert Chen worked with Major Phillips engineering personnel to expand the base's defensive perimeter using materials salvaged from abandoned construction sites in the surrounding area. Their combined expertise created layered defensive positions that could channel zombie attacks into kill zones while providing fallback positions if any defensive line was compromised. The engineering projects also served morale purposes by giving everyone concrete tasks that contributed to their collective survival. The afternoon brought an unexpected opportunity when Private Rodriguez established radio contact with a Navy destroyer operating off the coast. Fort Braxton, this is USS Franklin. We have capacity for civilian evacuation to secure offshore facilities. The destroyer's captain, Commander Jessica Baker, offered to provide naval gunfire support and helicopter evacuation services, but the base's inland location limited immediate assistance options. Nevertheless, the contact represented hope for eventual escape from the infected zone. Specialist Adams organized the base's medical volunteers into triage teams capable of handling mass casualty situations while maintaining infection control protocols. Her nursing background translated well to field medical operations, and her ability to remain calm under pressure helped train civilian volunteers who might face life-or-death medical decisions. The expanded medical capability would prove crucial as rescue operations brought in wounded survivors from increasingly dangerous situations. Master Sergeant Brooks implemented advanced combat training programs that prepared civilian survivors for defensive operations alongside military personnel. Former teachers, mechanics, and office workers learned to function as auxiliary troops capable of manning defensive positions, conducting patrols, and executing evacuation procedures. The veteran instructor's ability to instill discipline and confidence in untrained personnel multiplied the base's effective fighting strength without depleting professional military resources. Evening brought reports of a massive zombie horde converging on the base from multiple directions, apparently drawn by the increased activity and population density. Staff Sergeant Foster's reconnaissance teams estimated the approaching threat at over 1,000 infected individuals, representing the combined zombie population from several surrounding communities. The scale of the impending assault would test every defensive improvement and tactical adaptation they'd implemented. Captain Johnson established trauma counseling protocols for personnel showing signs of psychological stress from prolonged exposure to zombie combat operations. The base chaplain, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Harrison, worked with civilian mental health professionals among the survivors to provide psychological support that kept people functional despite the horror surrounding them. Maintaining mental health proved as crucial as physical defense in sustaining long-term resistance operations. The base's communications center became a hub for coordinating regional resistance efforts as Rodriguez and her team maintained contact with other surviving military installations and civilian strongholds. Information sharing about zombie behavior patterns, effective combat techniques, and resource management helped create a network of mutual support among isolated survivor groups. The intelligence gathered from multiple sources began revealing larger patterns in the infection spread and the zombies' behavioral characteristics. Private Washington volunteered for a dangerous reconnaissance mission to assess the approaching zombie horde's composition and movement patterns. His youth and agility allowed him to infiltrate areas too dangerous for larger patrols while gathering intelligence crucial for defensive planning. The young soldier's courage and tactical awareness impressed the veteran officers and established him as a valuable asset for special operations requirements. The massive zombie horde appeared on the horizon like a dark storm cloud, shambling across the agricultural landscape with the inexorable persistence of a natural disaster. Rivera watched through high-powered binoculars as the sea of infected humanity approached Fort Braxton, their collective moaning audible even at distance. The colonel's military experience included urban warfare, desert operations, and jungle combat, but nothing had prepared him for commanding a defense against an enemy that represented the animated remains of an entire region's population. Major Phillips took charge of coordinating the base's expanded artillery capabilities, positioning mortar teams and heavy weapons to create interlocking fields of fire across the approaches to the defensive perimeter. Her experience at Fort Morrison had taught harsh lessons about ammunition conservation and target prioritization when facing seemingly unlimited numbers of infected. "Colonel, I recommend we establish ammunition rationing protocols immediately," she advised Rivera. "During our final stand at Morrison, we learned that panic firing wastes resources faster than zombie attacks consume personnel." Sergeant Chen's demolitions expertise became crucial as he prepared contingency destruction charges throughout the base infrastructure. "Sir, if our defensive lines are compromised, I can create controllable barriers that will channel the infected into predetermined areas while preserving essential facilities," he explained while rigging explosive devices with the precision of a surgeon. The demolitions plan represented both tactical flexibility and a sobering acknowledgement that retreat options needed to remain available despite their defensive preparations. Dr. Williams made a breakthrough discovery while analyzing tissue samples from the most recently killed zombies. "Colonel, I've identified what appears to be a progressive deterioration in the infected nervous system that eventually limits their motor coordination," she reported with barely contained excitement. The older specimens show significantly reduced mobility and reaction time compared to newly turned individuals. Her research suggested that time might eventually work in humanity's favor if they could survive the initial waves of fresh, more capable zombies. The civilian survivor population proved more resilient and adaptable than anyone had expected, with former police officer Kevin Murphy emerging as an effective leader for organizing non-military personnel into support roles. Murphy's law enforcement background helped him identify individuals with useful skills while maintaining order among people traumatized by loss and terror. His ability to inspire confidence and cooperation multiplied the base's effective manpower without requiring extensive military training time. Captain Thompson established an intelligence coordination center that tracked zombie movement patterns across the region using input from multiple sources including drone reconnaissance, survivor radio reports, and satellite imagery analysis. "Sir, the infected appear to respond to large concentrations of human activity by converging from wider areas," he briefed Rivera. "Our defensive success may actually be creating a larger problem by attracting zombies from communities we haven't even considered as threats." Communications specialist Rodriguez maintained contact with the USS Franklin and coordinated helicopter evacuation flights for critically wounded personnel and high-value civilians including Dr. Williams' research materials. The destroyer's aviation capabilities provided crucial medical evacuation support while gathering intelligence about conditions in other coastal areas. However, the helicopter flights also attracted zombie attention, creating temporary but intense pressure on specific sections of the defensive perimeter. The first assault wave hit the eastern defensive line at sunset, with approximately 300 zombies pressing against the improved fortifications in a mass that threatened to overwhelm the position through sheer weight of numbers. Corporal Martinez's squad executed a fighting withdrawal to secondary positions while maintaining disciplined fire control that maximized zombie casualties without wasting ammunition. The young corporal's leadership during the tactical retreat impressed veteran officers and demonstrated how quickly personnel could adapt to zombie warfare requirements. Staff Sergeant Foster organized civilian volunteers into ammunition supply teams that kept frontline defenders supplied during extended engagements without exposing untrained personnel to direct combat situations. Former truck drivers, warehouse workers, and retail employees proved excellent at logistics operations that kept weapons functioning and positions supplied. Their contributions allowed trained soldiers to focus entirely on combat operations while maintaining the support infrastructure necessary for sustained defensive operations. Master Sergeant Brooks discovered that zombies showed minimal response to conventional crowd control techniques like tear gas or flashbang grenades, but bright lights and loud noises could be used to influence their movement patterns and concentration. This behavioral insight led to tactical innovations including using vehicle horns and spotlight arrays to manipulate zombie positioning before engaging with lethal force. The ability to influence enemy movement without expending ammunition provided crucial advantages during large-scale engagements. Specialist Adams established a field hospital capability that could perform emergency surgery and critical care medicine under combat conditions while maintaining infection control protocols that prevented zombie conversion of wounded personnel. Her medical team's ability to save lives while protecting the base from internal infection threats proved essential for maintaining both combat effectiveness and civilian morale during prolonged siege conditions. The night brought wave after wave of zombie attacks that tested every aspect of their defensive preparations, with infected individuals pressing against the perimeter in numbers that seemed impossible to maintain firepower against. Private Washington's reconnaissance intelligence proved crucial for predicting attack directions and concentrating defensive resources at critical points. His ability to gather actionable intelligence while remaining undetected by zombie hordes made him invaluable for tactical planning purposes. Captain Johnson implemented psychological support protocols that kept defenders functional during the horror of prolonged zombie combat while identifying personnel showing signs of combat stress that might compromise their effectiveness or safety. The base's mental health resources became as crucial as medical care for maintaining the human capacity to resist an enemy that challenged fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the nature of warfare itself. As dawn approached after 12 hours of continuous combat, the zombie assault began showing signs of decreasing intensity, not because the infected were retreating but because the accumulated bodies of destroyed zombies were creating physical barriers that impeded fresh attackers. The gruesome defensive advantage of zombie corpses blocking zombie attacks represented a tactical reality that conventional military doctrine had never anticipated. The morning sun revealed a landscape transformed by the night's carnage, with zombie corpses piled against Fort Braxton's defensive perimeter like grotesque snowdrifts. Rivera walked the defensive lines with Major Phillips, assessing their tactical situation while stepping carefully around the remains of what had once been their neighbors, friends, and fellow citizens. The colonel's combat experience included many battlefields, but none had prepared him for the psychological impact of killing enemies who retained the faces and clothing of ordinary people caught in an extraordinary nightmare. Sergeant Chen's assessment of their ammunition expenditure painted a concerning picture of resource depletion that threatened their ability to sustain defensive operations. "Sir, we consumed approximately 60% of our small arms ammunition during the night engagement," he reported while coordinating resupply efforts with surviving ordnance personnel. "At current consumption rates, we have enough ammunition for maybe 2 more major assaults before we're forced to rely on makeshift weapons and close-quarters combat." The mathematics of survival had become brutally simple. They needed to kill more zombies with fewer bullets. Dr. Williams presented research findings that offered both hope and horror in equal measure, based on her analysis of zombie behavioral patterns observed during the night's fighting. "Colonel, the infected show decreased coordination and motor function after approximately 72 hours post-reanimation, but they also demonstrate improved pack hunting behaviors when operating in large groups," she briefed Rivera. "Individual zombies are becoming less dangerous over time, but zombie hordes are becoming more tactically effective through some form of collective behavior we don't yet understand." The expanded refugee population created resource management challenges that tested Captain Thompson's logistical expertise as he coordinated food distribution, medical care, and housing assignments for nearly 800 survivors crowded into facilities designed for 200 military personnel. Former restaurant managers, school principals, and corporate executives found themselves working alongside military personnel to create organizational systems that kept essential services functioning despite overcrowding and resource shortages. Communications specialist Rodriguez intercepted fragmentary radio transmissions suggesting that major urban areas were experiencing complete social collapse, with zombie populations potentially numbering in the millions. "Sir, I'm receiving automated emergency broadcasts from cities as far south as Atlanta and as far north as Boston," she reported with barely controlled fear in her voice. "The infection appears to be spreading faster than any containment efforts, and we're losing contact with government facilities at all levels." The regional crisis was becoming a national catastrophe. Private Washington volunteered for an extremely dangerous reconnaissance mission to assess conditions in the surrounding communities and gather intelligence about zombie population density and movement patterns. His youth and small stature allowed him to move through areas too dangerous for larger patrols, while his natural athleticism and growing tactical awareness kept him alive in situations that would be fatal for less capable personnel. The young soldier's courage and effectiveness made him indispensable for intelligence-gathering operations. Master Sergeant Brooks organized civilian survivors into specialized work teams that maintained essential base functions while freeing military personnel for combat duties. Former electricians, plumbers, and mechanics proved invaluable for maintaining infrastructure that kept the base operational despite the siege conditions and overcrowding. Their civilian expertise complemented military training in ways that multiplied the base's overall effectiveness and sustainability. The afternoon brought an unexpected contact when a heavily armored convoy approached the base flying military colors, led by Brigadier General Patricia Coleman and the remnants of the 82nd Airborne Division's regional command structure. "Colonel Rivera, I'm establishing Fort Braxton as the regional command post for Operation Lazarus," General Coleman announced upon arrival. "We're coordinating survivor extraction and consolidation operations across a 6-state area, and your base has become crucial to maintaining organized resistance in this sector." Captain Johnson's medical team faced their most challenging case when several convoy personnel arrived with suspicious bite wounds that hadn't fully healed, raising questions about infection timelines and the reliability of current screening protocols. Dr. Williams' growing expertise in zombie pathology proved crucial for making life-or-death decisions about quarantine procedures and treatment options. The medical team's ability to distinguish between infected and uninfected wounded personnel became essential for maintaining base security while providing humanitarian assistance. Staff Sergeant Foster's gate security operations expanded to accommodate increased traffic from military convoys, refugee groups, and reconnaissance patrols returning from increasingly dangerous missions in the surrounding infected territory. His team's ability to maintain security protocols while processing large numbers of arrivals under combat conditions demonstrated the evolution of military procedures to address unprecedented challenges. The gate facility became a crucial choke point for controlling both friendly and potentially hostile contacts. Sergeant Major Wells coordinated the integration of newly arrived military personnel with existing base operations, creating hybrid units that combined experienced zombie fighters with fresh troops who brought additional equipment and ammunition. Her organizational skills proved crucial for maintaining unit cohesion and combat effectiveness while rapidly expanding the base's military capability. The integration process also helped disseminate hard-won tactical knowledge about zombie warfare to personnel from installations that hadn't faced prolonged siege conditions. Specialist Adams established a comprehensive medical training program that prepared civilian volunteers to handle basic medical emergencies and infection screening procedures, multiplying the base's medical capacity without requiring extensive professional training. Former teachers, nurses' aides, and concerned parents learned to provide first aid, monitor quarantine patients, and assist with surgical procedures under field conditions. The expanded medical capability proved essential for managing the health needs of an increasingly large and traumatized population. The evening brought intelligence reports of a massive zombie convergence taking place approximately 50 miles to the north, where the combined infected populations from multiple major cities appeared to be forming a megahorde numbering in the tens of thousands. Private Rodriguez's radio intercept suggested that this unprecedented concentration of zombies was slowly moving south toward their position, representing a threat that could overwhelm even their improved defensive capabilities. The approaching megahorde would test every tactical innovation and resource management improvement they developed during their siege experience. General Coleman briefed Rivera on the larger strategic situation, revealing that Fort Braxton had become one of only a handful of functioning military installations east of the Mississippi River still capable of offensive operations against zombie concentrations. "Colonel, Operation Lazarus isn't just about survival anymore," she explained while studying tactical maps covered in red zones indicating infected territory. "We're tasked with establishing secure corridors that will allow civilian evacuation to safe zones while maintaining military capability to reclaim infected territory once we understand how to permanently stop this outbreak." General Coleman's strategic briefing revealed the true scope of Operation Lazarus as she outlined plans to transform Fort Braxton from a defensive stronghold into a staging area for offensive operations against zombie-controlled territory. "Colonel Rivera, intelligence indicates that the infection may be showing signs of natural limitation in areas where the zombie population has depleted available human hosts," she explained while marking clear zones on regional maps. "Our mission is to establish and maintain corridors between surviving strongholds while conducting systematic elimination of zombie concentrations that threaten evacuation routes." The arrival of specialized military equipment including armored personnel carriers, heavy mortars, and chemical decontamination units transformed the base's capabilities from siege defense to mobile warfare operations. Sergeant Chen worked with newly arrived ordnance specialists to establish ammunition production facilities using materials salvaged from abandoned factories in the region. His demolitions expertise proved invaluable for adapting civilian industrial equipment to military ammunition requirements, potentially solving their resource depletion problems through local manufacturing. Dr. Williams collaborated with military scientists from the Centers for Disease Control to establish a field research laboratory capable of analyzing zombie tissue samples and testing potential countermeasures to the infection. "We've identified what appears to be a metabolic vulnerability in the reanimation process," she reported to the expanded command staff. "The infected require some form of cellular energy to maintain motor function, and prolonged activity without nutritional input leads to progressive deterioration. If we can accelerate this process, we might be able to neutralize zombie threats without expending ammunition." Private Washington's reconnaissance missions provided crucial intelligence about the megahorde's composition and movement patterns, revealing that the massive zombie concentration included infected military personnel still wearing combat gear and carrying weapons. "Sir, I observed approximately 200 infected soldiers within the main body of the horde," he reported during his mission debrief. "They're not using their weapons effectively, but they retain enough motor coordination to operate simple mechanisms like vehicle doors and gate latches." This intelligence suggested that zombie intelligence might be higher than previously assessed in certain circumstances. Captain Thompson coordinated with Air Force liaison officers to establish helicopter supply routes that could maintain contact with other survivor strongholds without risking ground convoys through zombie-controlled territory. The aviation assets proved crucial for evacuating critically wounded personnel, transporting essential supplies, and conducting aerial reconnaissance of zombie concentrations too dangerous for ground observation. However, helicopter operations also attracted zombie attention from wider areas, creating tactical complications that required careful mission planning. The base's civilian population proved increasingly valuable as former engineers, scientists, and technical specialists contributed expertise that complemented military capabilities. Kevin Murphy organized survivor work teams that established workshop facilities for maintaining equipment, producing improvised weapons, and creating defensive improvements using materials scavenged from abandoned communities. The combination of civilian technical knowledge and military tactical expertise created innovations that neither group could have developed independently. Master Sergeant Brooks implemented advanced combat training programs that prepared selected civilian volunteers for offensive operations alongside military personnel, creating hybrid units capable of conducting complex missions in zombie-controlled territory. Former police officers, security guards, and military veterans among the survivor population proved excellent candidates for tactical training that prepared them for reconnaissance, supply runs, and search and rescue operations. The expanded combat capability allowed the base to conduct multiple simultaneous operations without depleting professional military personnel. Communications specialist Rodriguez established contact with international military forces operating from secure offshore facilities, revealing that the zombie outbreak had achieved global proportions but remained geographically limited to populated continental areas. "Sir, I'm receiving transmissions from Australian, British, and Japanese naval units coordinating international evacuation operations," she reported. The infection appears to be contained to land masses with high population density, while island nations and offshore platforms remain secure. This intelligence offered hope for eventual recovery and reconstruction once immediate survival needs were addressed. Staff Sergeant Foster's security teams expanded their operations to include offensive patrols that cleared zombie concentrations from supply routes and evacuation corridors, using tactics specifically developed for zombie elimination operations. The patrol teams learned to operate in infected territory while maintaining communication with base operations and avoiding engagement with zombie groups too large for their firepower. These offensive capabilities proved essential for maintaining contact with other survivor groups and gathering intelligence about changing conditions in zombie-controlled areas. Captain Johnson established psychological evaluation protocols that identified personnel best suited for different types of zombie warfare operations, recognizing that sustained exposure to undead combat created unique forms of combat stress requiring specialized management. Some individuals proved naturally suited for close-quarters zombie elimination, while others functioned better in support roles or technical operations that didn't require direct contact with infected hostiles. Sergeant Major Wells coordinated the establishment of satellite outposts at strategic locations around the base's expanded perimeter, creating early warning systems and fallback positions that could provide advance notice of approaching zombie threats. These outposts, manned by mixed military-civilian teams, used improvised communication systems and observation equipment to monitor zombie movement patterns across a wider area. The expanded intelligence network proved crucial for tactical planning and resource allocation decisions. The evening brought reports that the megahorde had changed direction and was now moving toward a major highway interchange approximately 30 miles from Fort Braxton, potentially threatening evacuation routes to coastal extraction points. Major Phillips coordinated with General Coleman to develop contingency plans for either defending the base against the massive zombie concentration or conducting a fighting withdrawal to secondary positions. The strategic decision would determine not only their own survival but the fate of hundreds of civilian refugees depending on their protection. Dr. Williams achieved a breakthrough in understanding zombie metabolism when she discovered that infected tissue showed rapid deterioration when exposed to specific chemical compounds found in common industrial cleaning agents. "Colonel, we might be able to develop chemical weapons that accelerate the natural decay process in zombie tissue," she reported with cautious optimism. "If we can weaponize this discovery, we could potentially eliminate large zombie concentrations without expending ammunition or exposing personnel to direct combat risks." Demolitions expert Chen worked with civilian engineers to establish improvised manufacturing capabilities for producing chemical weapons based on Dr. Williams' research, using materials scavenged from abandoned industrial facilities in the region. The chemical warfare program represented a potentially decisive tactical advantage if they could produce sufficient quantities of the zombie-specific toxins before the megahorde arrived. However, the manufacturing process required resources and personnel that were already stretched thin by defensive operations and refugee support requirements. Private Washington volunteered for an extremely dangerous deep reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence about the megahorde's internal organization and movement patterns, information crucial for developing effective countermeasures against the unprecedented zombie concentration. His mission would require him to infiltrate areas where a single mistake could result in death and reanimation as one of the creatures he was trying to defeat. The young soldier's courage and tactical skills made him uniquely qualified for intelligence-gathering operations that could determine the outcome of their collective survival efforts. The final confrontation began at dawn when Private Washington's reconnaissance confirmed that the megahorde had resumed movement toward Fort Braxton, its massive size creating a dark stain across the landscape visible even from the base's observation towers. Rivera stood in the command center surrounded by tactical displays and communication equipment that painted a picture of humanity's last stand in the region. The young soldier's intelligence reports revealed that the zombie concentration numbered over 50,000 infected individuals, representing the combined populations of multiple cities merged into a single, inexorable wave of undead destruction. General Coleman made the strategic decision to implement Operation Phoenix, a coordinated offensive that would utilize every tactical innovation developed during their siege experience while testing Dr. Williams' chemical warfare discoveries on an unprecedented scale. Colonel Rivera, this engagement will determine whether organized military resistance can survive against zombie threats of this magnitude, she briefed the expanded command staff. Success here could provide the tactical knowledge necessary for reclaiming infected territory across the entire eastern seaboard. Sergeant Chen's chemical weapons manufacturing program reached critical operational capacity just as the megahorde approached within striking distance of their artillery positions, creating improvised chemical shells that could deliver zombie-specific toxins across wide areas. His collaboration with civilian engineers had produced delivery systems using modified mortar rounds, aerial spray devices, and even crop-dusting aircraft scavenged from abandoned airports. The chemical arsenal represented humanity's first potentially decisive advantage over the zombie plague since the outbreak began. Dr. Williams coordinated with medical teams to establish decontamination procedures that would protect friendly personnel from chemical weapons effects while maintaining the toxin's lethality against zombie targets. Her research had identified specific compounds that accelerated tissue breakdown in infected individuals without harming living humans, but field deployment of chemical weapons required extensive safety protocols to prevent accidental exposure. The medical team's expertise in chemical safety proved as crucial as their combat medical capabilities. Master Sergeant Brooks led the civilian volunteer units in their first major offensive operation, demonstrating how ordinary people could become effective zombie fighters when properly trained and equipped with appropriate tactics. Former teachers, mechanics, and office workers moved with military precision while executing complex maneuvers designed to channel zombie movements into chemical weapon target areas. Their courage and competence proved that the human capacity for adaptation and resistance could overcome even the most horrifying challenges. Captain Thompson coordinated the multi-phase battle plan that combined conventional military tactics with zombie-specific innovations, creating a defensive strategy that could potentially stop the megahorde while preserving enough resources for continued operations. The tactical plan required precise timing and coordination between artillery strikes, chemical weapons deployment, infantry operations, and civilian support activities. Success depended on every unit executing their assigned roles flawlessly despite facing an enemy unlike anything in military history. The first phase of the battle saw conventional artillery strikes fragment the megahorde into smaller groups that could be engaged more effectively by chemical weapons and small unit tactics, while aerial reconnaissance confirmed that the zombie concentration was larger and more organized than previous intelligence had suggested. Private Rodriguez coordinated communications between all elements of the operation while maintaining contact with offshore naval units and other survivor strongholds. The communications network proved essential for real-time tactical adjustments and coordination with external support assets. Chemical weapons deployment achieved devastating effectiveness against zombie concentrations, with Dr. Williams' toxins causing rapid tissue breakdown that permanently neutralized infected targets without requiring ammunition expenditure. The success of chemical warfare operations validated months of research and development while providing tactical capabilities that could potentially turn the tide of humanity's war against the zombie plague. However, the chemical weapons required time to take effect, creating dangerous intervals when zombie forces could continue advancing despite being fatally contaminated. Staff Sergeant Foster's Gate security teams expanded into mobile strike forces that conducted tactical withdrawals through predetermined phases, drawing zombie groups into chemical contamination zones while maintaining communication with command elements. The security team's evolution from static defenders to mobile tactical units demonstrated how military personnel could adapt their training to zombie warfare requirements. Their tactical flexibility proved crucial for maintaining defensive coherence during complex multi-phase operations against overwhelming numbers of infected hostiles. Captain Johnson's medical teams established forward treatment facilities that could provide immediate care for chemical weapons exposure and zombie combat injuries while maintaining infection control protocols under battlefield conditions. The medical capability proved essential for sustaining combat operations during extended engagements against zombie forces, while also treating civilian casualties and potential infection cases. The integration of military and civilian medical resources created treatment capabilities that exceeded what either group could have achieved independently. Specialist Adams coordinated evacuation operations that moved non-essential personnel and critical resources to secure offshore facilities while maintaining base operational capability for continued resistance operations. The evacuation procedures balanced humanitarian concerns with tactical necessities, ensuring that civilian survivors could reach safety while preserving military assets needed for ongoing zombie elimination operations. Her organizational skills proved crucial for managing complex logistics under combat conditions. The final phase of the battle saw the complete destruction of the megahorde through coordinated chemical weapons attacks supported by conventional military firepower, demonstrating that organized human resistance could defeat even the largest zombie concentrations when properly equipped and tactically prepared. Rivera watched from the command center as 50,000 infected individuals succumbed to weaponized toxins that dissolved zombie tissue while leaving the surrounding environment habitable for human survivors. The victory represented humanity's first decisive triumph over the zombie plague and proved that the infection could be defeated through scientific research, military innovation, and human determination. As the sun set over Fort Braxton, Rivera addressed the assembled survivors and military personnel who had transformed from desperate refugees into the foundation of humanity's recovery efforts. The base had evolved from a last-ditch defensive position into the staging area for offensive operations that could reclaim infected territory and restore civilization to zombie-controlled regions. General Coleman announced that Operation Phoenix had succeeded beyond all strategic projections, providing tactical doctrine and chemical weapons technology that could be replicated at other survivor strongholds. Dr. Williams' research breakthrough had given humanity the tools necessary to fight back against the zombie plague, while the combined military and civilian expertise developed at Fort Braxton offered hope for rebuilding a world devastated by undead horror. The zombie apocalypse had tested every aspect of human courage, innovation, and determination, but the survivors had proven that even the most nightmarish threats could be overcome through cooperation, sacrifice, and the refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds.